Let's make it so that our gem cleaner has an interface. Hello everyone, this is Ali Reza. Welcome to the Mentor Code Lab. Again, like previous video, I will start with the vanilla way and then move toward using my own library. Now, the very first order of business is to add a GUI for the game. Normally, when you want to have a GUI, you have to do a few different steps. Let's make a to-do list for that. To do, add the menu opening to the block. The next one, to do, add the payload to the block entity. Then to do, add the handler class, and finally to do, add the renderer class. Now we will talk about the difference between handler and renderer in this video, but let's start with easy parts. How can we make it so that when we right click a block, it opens an interface for us? Now keep in mind that the code I'm gonna write will have a little bit of a problem because we didn't add the handler, we didn't add the renderer, and as we go forward, these errors will fix themselves. Normally, in any block that has an interface, you want to open it when you are right clicking on the block. You may want to open it when you have anything in your hand and maybe empty hand, or you may want to use something very special when you right click on the block. If you want to open the block no matter what, you override the unuse. If you want to use a special item, you use the unuse with item method. In this second scenario, you will check the item type first, and then if it's proper thing, you go forward. Now let's go with the unuse in this case. The very first thing we want to do, we want to make sure that we are on the server side. Now this may look confusing. We are dealing with graphic user interface, and we already established the fact that GUI is something that client side will handle it. Then why do we want to make sure that we are on the server side here? The reason is simple. We are making the logic to make sure that we clicked on the block. We want to make sure that the block is the same thing that we want, and then we want to make sure that we call the client and say that, hey, please open the screen for this particular player. Now, how to do that? Of course, when we want to check if the word is not client, and instead of this, we can remove it and say, please return action result success. Means that if it's client, then forget it. Then we say, named screen handler factory, and we call it factory or screen handler factory or whatever. And instead of what the IntelliSense gave me, we want to say word dot get block entity at the position, and please typecast it to the type of the block entity we want. Now it's gem cleaner BE, okay? And we will put everything inside another parenthesis. Now, she'll yell at me because honestly, the gem cleaner BE is not extending name the screen handler factory yet, but don't worry, we will get there. As I said, this first class will have tons of errors right now. So now we want to check if we were not null. So if a screen handler factory is not null, because keep in mind, this can be any other block entity by any chance. Yes, normally it shouldn't be. Normally, if you have the gem cleaner on this block path and you're right clicking on it, it should have a GUI and it should be a named screen handler factory because the code is compiled. You're playing the game. Then why do we check if it's not null? Well, it's more like a sanity check because we are dealing with a server-based game. I don't know, maybe in a millisecond between my clicking and the response of the server, something happens and that block entity is destroyed. Okay, so here we make sure that we are actually correct. Then we say player dot open handled screen with this factory and finally return the success. Now this line is a server command that will send something to the client and tell the client that, hey, you know what? You need to open this block entities interface. And this first line makes sure that it collects every data it needs to send to the client. Okay, so far so good. We don't need to do anything else inside the block. So we got rid of this first to do. Now, as I said, this is the vanilla way of doing it. My library has something that I can use, and I will remove it. I will show the code first inside my library. And as you see, I'm just getting the block entity and I'm making sure that it's an instance of IBE screen. And then I'm calling the same thing on the server player, open handle the screen for this block entity. Now, what is IBE screen? It's just an extension of the extended screen handler factory. Now, You may say, hey, wait a minute, you were using named screen factory. Extended is the child of named screen, so I'm actually adding one more layer, and that is get screen opening data. This means that not only I name this GUI, but also I'm sending some payload from server to the client. Okay, and that's it basically. So you may ask, why did I put another interface on top of it? I want to make sure that I'm using the block entities from my own library here. And honestly, again, I gave myself the ability to add anything under IBU screen in the future if I need to. This is almost the same code. We take a look at that. We should open something. We are on the server. We get the block entity. We make sure that the player is the server player. And then finally, we move forward. Take note, all of this is based on a property and says it has GUI. And then it will open it. Now, has GUI is reading this. This dot right click to open GUI. And if you look, I have a method here that says right click to open GUI, and it sets it to true. Bottom line is that I could get rid of that whole thing on the use, and when I'm sending a block properties BE after the should take, I add another property and I say that right click to open GUI. Everything will work here. Okay, this is our block. As much as I think I will not have anything else in this block, let's go into our block entity. We have a block entity being synced, means that we can have inventories and storages in it, and we want to make sure that we are sending the payload for the screen. We need to implement the extended screen handler factory, and here I need to send in the payload. Now the payload will be block pause payload from my own library. Now block pause payload is nothing other than a payload that has its own codec, its own packet codec, and it's just carrying a block pause as the payload sent between the client and server. Now that I have that, I can say that, implement the methods for the get screen opening data, get the display name, and create menu. Okay, now get the opening data shouldn't be that hard. All we want to do is say we need to return new block pose payload with the position from this block entity. That's it. And no, we don't need the up. So that's the payload that we will send from server to the client. By having the position in the client side from the word class, we can get the block entity, we can get the block state, we can get anything we need. Now the display name, I will return from reference import dot translate container, and I need to send a key. So this is gem.cleaner. Now, if you notice, this is again from my own library. Translate container just adds the mod id dot container dot the value. So if I want to add the language provider, I have to come back down and find my own things that use the custom text, and I will say that add. Remember, it is the mod ID, so it's mod ID plus, and here we have the dot container dot gem dot cleaner, and here is the translation gem cleaner. Okay, now that we have our translation being covered, finally it's time to add the create menu. Now in create menu, we need to send in the handler. So we say return new gem cleaner screen handler, and here we send in the sync ID. We send in the player inventory. We want to send in the block entity and anything else that we will have. Okay, take note, I'm not sending in the player. Cannot resolve. Yes, I don't have it yet. This is all we need to do inside our block entity. Now let's take a look at the block, and we should be able to see that we have no problem here. Okay, so added the payload to the block entity. Now we want to handle the handler and the renderer. Now what is the difference between a screen handler and a screen renderer? A screen handler is responsible of giving the data to the client. The client needs to know that this is the block entity, this is the player, and maybe we have something like, I don't know, fluid storage, other containers in here, and then it will provide the data for the slots as we want to, and that would be it. However, because it's related to GUI, of course, the slots need the X and Y coordinates, and and maybe width and height as you prefer, but it will not draw anything. It's just a provider of the information. The renderer, on the other hand, or as some programmers call it, screen, is responsible of rendering things on the monitor so that you can see things. Now, as I said, some people have things like this: gem cleaner screen handler, and then when it comes to renderer, they will drop this handler and call it gem cleaner screen. I prefer to have that renderer name because this clearly indicates that we are dealing with rendering. Inside our screen folder, I have the handler and the renderer. Inside the handler, I need a new Java class called the screen handler for gem cleaner, and then I will have the gem screen renderer for the renderer, new Java class gem cleaner screen renderer. Now that I have those two classes, you see that I still have a problem here. Now I will add a to-do here, and don't worry if you don't understand what it is. We need to add something else here when we move forward into crafting strategy. Right now, all I want to do is to have the bare minimum block entity that you can right click on it and open a GUI and render the GUI. Okay, so it says that create the constructor for the gem cleaner handler. But before diving there, we need to register our screen handler and our screen renderer. To register them, we have these classes, mod screen handler and a client class actually. Mod screen handler sits on the registry here, and the client is the main client class. The mod screen handlers, as the name suggests, is responsible of registering the handlers. So here we want to define it and register it. We say that public static final screen handler type of the gem cleaner screen handler, and we call it gem cleaner. Of course, I don't need to provide this screen handler at the end, and I need to remove that final thing from here. Here we say gem cleaner equals to. Now, if I recall, on the main, I should have anything related to the screens. Yeah, JScreen. So JScreen dot register. Now, the register needs a name, of course. So we say that it's gem cleaner screen handler, and then it needs the extended factory. Don't worry, it's really easy. We say new extended screen handler type dot anything. Okay, but we don't want to call the extended factory because this is not what we want. We just need that extended handler type, and yes, we are going to use it raw for time being. Then parenthesis, and finally at the end we will say the packet codec. So the packet codec is block pause payload dot packet codec. Okay, now what do we have here? Extended is the factory and the packet codec actually. So instead of this, my own library is asking for something else. Actually, what we want is gem cleaner screen handler. I think it's colon E. No, wait a second. Okay, we have some problems here. Let's deal with one of them first and then the others. You see that we have this make gem cleaner screen handler extend the screen handler. That's exactly what we need to do first. So we click on this, it will add this extension, and of course now it says that, hey, please make it abstract or otherwise implement methods for these. Okay, let's take them and then let's create the constructor. I will nuke them later, don't worry. But right now I want to make sure that these will work, and the factory colon new. Yes, we have a problem here because it says that has protected access. Well, guess what? We make it public. But this won't cut the thing, okay? Because now it says that, hey, no instance of type variables exists so that it confirms to this, and it needs the type and sync ID. In other words, we have something that is not acceptable as the constructor. Now, let's have a copy of this, and let's say that we have the type. Actually, I think I need to move things around. So I will have the sync ID, then I will have the inventory. So it has player inventory, and we call it inventory, or actually let's go with player inventory, why not? And then we need the block pause, we call it pause. This is one constructor. Yes, we are not calling the super yet. And again, it says create the constructor. Okay, let's create it. And you see that it's asking for the sync ID, the player inventory, but yeah, I did derp here. Okay, it's not position, it's block position. Okay, so here we say that please call this with the sync ID, then the player inventory, then the player inventory dot player dot, yeah, it will become problematic. Get word dot get block entity, and here we say that please use the pause dot, actually, what did they call it? Block pause payload. So block pause payload dot pause. And then if I want to, I will add the delegate here. But you notice that we have another problem because now we need to create this overload, okay? And we say that public gem cleaner screen handler, we need int sync ID, comma, then the player inventory, and not the block pause, but here we want the gem cleaner BE, and we call it block entity. And of course, it will yell at me because we need the block entity here. And this will solve the other problem that we had. So now we can just call this super. And here, if I remove this, it's actually redundant. We don't need that. Of course, we don't have the type. So here we say mod, what the type is needing is the screen handler. So mod screen handlers dot gem cleaner, and then the sync ID. Now, why do we provide these two different constructors? One of them is being called from server, okay? And one of them is being called on the client side. Now, as much as I remember, this is on the server side and this is on the client side. I don't know. But long story short, one of them is the server side and one of them is the client side. And honestly, this is where you will start adding your stuff into the screen handler. Okay, so that is why I say this is the client side. If we don't have this one, we will have problem here because I can comment this guy. Yes, we will have a problem here, but we will be okay here. And if I do the comment out and I will comment it here, you will see that we have a problem because this factory especially is asking for this constructor. It means that we have a sync ID, player inventory, and the payload. And honestly, this makes sense because we are sending in the payload. If you want to, you can ignore it here and do other ways of handling things. But honestly, I prefer having this second one, and we will work with this second one in the next episodes. It's a good thing to have this second one. Now, you may ask yourself, why do I have two constructors? Normally, you only need this because the mod screen handler will handle this constructor, will send in the block pause as the payload, and you can do whatever you want here. You don't need to have this second constructor, but at any time, if you make the decision that you know what, I need an instance of this screen handler and I know the block entity directly and I want to call it from the block entity directly, then for example here, I could say return new gem cleaner screen handler and I will send the sync ID, the player inventory, and as you see, I already done it, the block entity right here. This is actually calling the second constructor. If I don't want to have this second constructor, yes, I could do something like this. Let me get it. I could do this. Instead of block entity, I could say new block pause payload with the this.position. And it would work because it's reading the first overload of the constructor. So it's up to you which one you want to work with and which one you prefer. However, you will see that later we will add something called property delegate. Now, if I want to send the property delegate here, I can't have something like this, property delegate here, because this will fail. So we can't have the property delegate in this condition, and we need to create the property delegate, but we can have the property delegate in this second one. Long story short, get into the habit of having these two constructors because one of them is being used by the registry at the start of the game, and the other one is actually being used inside the game where you are right-clicking on the block entity and the block entity is sending information. So this is our screen handler. However, we need to have a screen renderer because if we provide the information, for example, if we can use this screen or not, here is how we can move items inside the inventory. Here is our inventory slots and stuff like that. Well, guess what? It won't render anything. So we need that renderer too. And this one will extend the handled screen of type gem cleaner screen handler. And by doing that, now we have to import methods for draw background. And if you take a look, it should have a draw foreground or render or something like that. Draw background. And it says that please create the constructor. That's okay. So we have render. And finally, we have other things like init if we want to. It's a good thing to have. And as you saw, I just opened the handled screen. And if I go into structures, sort them alphabetically, so we have draw foreground, there we go, and then render. So these are the 4 boilerplate methods that we can use to make any screen being rendered. I will talk about them in the next video step by step, but in this video we want to do something else. Now keep in mind we already registered the screen handler inside mod screen handlers, but we didn't do anything to these screen renderers and we need to save them. So I will make a copy of this mod screen handler, and the way I'm doing it, I'm holding Control, click, drag and drop, and I will call it mod screen renderers. And because I used the refactoring, you see that it's mod screen renderers, and we have this, but I will remove it in a second. Then we have the constructor and init. Now inside init, we want to do different things. Here we want to say handle screen, put an S there, handle the screens dot register mod screen handlers dot gem cleaner. This is the handler. Then we need to provide the factory for our renderer, and that's really easy. You say gem screen renderer colon new, and this will register our renderer. However, where do we want to call this mod screen renderers is from our client class, because this is totally client side. So here we say mod screen renderers that's in it, and of course now I don't have anything to add on top of these, so inside init we need to say logger.log. Do we have a screen handler in it? But right now I don't have anything for the renderers, so instead I will say here logger.log g for log green. Let's take a look at this message here. It says registering screen handlers. I will copy it, I will paste it, and I will say it's renderers. So now we need to do 2 things. First, we need to run our datagen. Why do I need to run the datagen? Because I added something to our language translation. And then, of course, we can run the game and test that nothing is blown up. When I tried to run the datagen, it yelled at me that, you know what, we have something as a problem in mod blocks. And that was the constructor of gem cleaner being protected. So I just made it public and rerunning the datagen right now. One thing that I can mention as the datagen is running is that if you run the datagen and it's successfully finishing its job, means that your mod is compilable and you can build the mod. It may not work because you lack some functionality, but you don't have any build time errors, like, I don't know, accessibility, for example, the public being protected, or something is missing in some code, or you have an error in some code. For example, some people deliberately put some errors here and then come back to fix it and they forget to fix it. Such a dirty thing when you can use to-dos. But anyway, if you run the datagen at that time, it will give you error and it will not compile and it will not succeed. So you can go back and fix those errors. However, if your datagen is finished and it's generating the data for you, it means that you don't have any deliberately errors there. Now, as you see, I have something again. And let's take a look at this time. It says property Boolean property is not defined for block ultra IO gem cleaner. Let me see. I think I know what's the problem. If we go into our model provider for the blocks, and let's see those our machines and the gem cleaner. Yes, here we go. I'm using properties dot powered. However, we switch to use lit. Now, of course, if you only have one Boolean property to state the activation of the block, it's okay. You can switch back to powered here instead of lit. You can say has powered properties and it would work. But if I move this one toward lit, this one needs to be lit again to fix the error. And now we can run the datagen. Now, take note, this was one of those errors that you wouldn't see any errors in the right-hand side or left-hand side of projects and in top, or even on analyzing the project using any smart helper tool inside your IDE, because it's a runtime error. And when you want to run the datagen, it will yell at you that, you know what, you are messing with something that is not there. Okay, as you see, we succeeded, means that we fixed that problem. Now, let's take a look at something here. It says failed to get integer config value for GUI spread blah. Let's take a look at this config. So it's lava GUI spread distance. Lava GUI, here we go, spread spread distance. And then water GUI spread, lava GUI destroy, water GUI destroy. I wonder, because they are there, both of them. That's okay. And actually, I know that's okay because I'm not writing them manually, So it seems that our data gen is not capable of reading them for some reason. I don't care as long as this log doesn't show up on the client runtime. But then what I want to see here is that I'm registering the mod screen handlers here. And then when I'm running the client, I want to see this registering screen renderers. We are calling our inits properly. And honestly, if I see this error about configs again, I may nuke the config and see if it works again or not. But anyway, now that we have the data gen finished, finally, we can run the client. Of course, right now, we will see absolutely nothing if we click on our gem cleaner. However, the aim here is to make sure that we don't have a bug. We shouldn't see any null point exceptions. We shouldn't crash. We shouldn't get any warnings or errors in the log file. Everything should be clean and normal and working. The only thing is that when we right click on the block, nothing will show up. Okay, as I'm waiting for the game to come up, I want to show something to you. If you recall, after this all 70 config entries blah, we had an error inside the run data gen. However, as you see, we don't have any errors here and the game is processing forward without any warnings or errors. We are even loading the client and then the OpenGL stuff, and it's already passed through our mod and into other things in the game. So we don't have any problems there. This is related to not being logged into the game in a real game loader right now, and Minecraft is up and running and ready. So I will delete this one. I will delete this one. And actually, I will create a test word. Now, keep in mind, although I have a flat word that is related to the test game and demonstration of everything in the game, I'm not going to log into there and try it because that word is related to me showing what I have in the game. And I don't want to ruin that one. So all I need to have is my own gem cleaner. Now, if I put it down, yes, it's looking toward me, so the facing is already working. The only option and only problem is that if I right click on it, will I get any errors no matter how much I right click on the block? And as I said, I am not doing anything right now, so that's it. It will not show up anything and the game is continuing forward. In the next video, we will come back and start writing the code for rendering the screen. And honestly, if the screen is not showing up at that point, we will have a deep problem. If you like these videos, please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and turn on that bell so that when I publish a new video, you will get informed. Have fun, everyone. Bye.